Rye's son of a bitch and bush rye. Rye brome, Bromus secalinus, is a plant that used to be growing together with bush rye in the slash and burn areas. Rye brome is a newcomer, but it's an old family and it's permanent. Though it has become less and less in Finland rare to see this plant. So the bluish dots and the really dark blue ones are these newer ones, newer dots where it has been seen. And you can actually find it in among rye if you have some old heritage rye that have been cultivated all the time, so to say, on the fields in Finland, then in that way you could find one of these old Bromus secalinus. The rye brome used to be a very bad weed among rye, and still in 1970s it was growing a lot in Mustiala on the field when rye was cultivated. Nearly no research is though done on it. And how come? A beloved child has many names. It has so many names. People in different parts of Finland know it by these different names. And looking at historical sources, you find also out nearly 30 different names for this plant. It's called mouse rye, goose oat, stork oat, human brome, and bear oat. Eastern parts of Finland it is known as kastari, kasteri, kattari, kasperi, hiireruis, hiireruis, and in the western parts of Finland it's known under the word luste. In Russia it's believed that rye can change into rye broom, and this same thing was also mentioned in a source from 1850s from the Ingerian land, which is nowadays a part of Russia, and in that area used to live the Ingerian people, which are a part of the Finno-Ugric language family. They are close related to Finns. So if you speak Finnish, you could also understand the Ingerian language. The Ingerian land was in the area around St. Petersburg today, so between St. Petersburg and the Estonian border. Also here it has been written down that farmers think that this rye can turn into, or actually that if it's a very good year, then this rye brome can turn into rye, and then the opposite have been written down in some Russian sources. Of course, if you grow several years rye in the same field, then rye brome will take over the field. Let's still spend some few minutes with the word and the meaning, the many meanings that the name of the rye broom have in Finnish language. And they are a little bit also mentioned like in different connections, all are though related to agriculture. Rye broom is mentioned to be a grain hay. In the field is growing goose oat, and then called also Kasperi hay, and Kasper rye, and oat hay. So a name of a cereal and then related to hay. It's also mentioned in connection to cultivating. black bread and that it makes a sound when toots bites into a bread that has a lot of this rye broom. Rye is not free threshing, so or rye broom is not free threshing, so rye is free threshing, no husk. But rye broom, it has a small husk around it, so it is possible actually to quite easily remove it. But when these old sources are mentioning this black bread and this making a sound when your tooth bites into it, so that comes from that the husk has not been removed and the husk is very hard. And there is also one connection, a good eater. So if you eat well, then there has also been used this similar kind of word, kastar. And then there is even a tool for cutting bushes, which is named lustin, as it was luste, the name of the plant in Western Finland. What do we then know about rye broom? It was there from Stone Age to Bronze Age and even up to 1950s, and in 2018 I was told that it is also growing among a heritage rye in North Karelia. So it is still there, even it's quite rare. And here I have been sowing this Polvijärvi rye broom that was growing in northern Karelia. As rye is biannual, you have to sow it 1 year and it gives the seeds the next year. And here is the same rye broom as from before, in the autumn, the picture taken. And you can see it looks quite much like rye. And here you can see a rye broom. I'm showing with my mouse, it's up here in the upper part of the picture, here and here. And it grows not as high as rye, so a little bit under that. And rye broom and rye, here we have now the Vavilov mimicry law. The Vavilovian mimicry requires 3 factors: a model, the crop or desirable plant, here it is the rye; a mimic, the weed, here it's Bromus secalinus; and an operator, the discriminating agent, possible a human, animal or machine, and here it's the human. So Bromus secalinus, brome rye, is imitating the rye, and it wants to come indoors during the winter together with the rye, and then it wants to be sown again out on the field in the springtime. This rye was most likely tolerated. It was tolerated because it didn't taste bad. It tastes quite similar to rye. So the only thing is that it's not free threshing. But there has been found also free threshing rye brooms in the world. So and we have also made now milling trials with it, and it's pretty easy to get rid of the husk on this rye broom. This photo is from Russia, and you can see here how rye broom have really taken over this field, so there is really a lot of it growing here. And one meaning of the rye broom is a grain at the campfire, so perhaps a reference to slash and burn could be made here. And this comes from the Russian language. And there is another Bromus subspecies, Bromus mollis, that can stand high temperatures up to 93 degrees. Yes, preparing for climate change, a grain that stands fires. Perhaps we have too little information and research on rye broom. What do we then know about Bromus family? There are two main bromus that have been imitating our grains. One is the whiskered brown. It's bigger than rye brome, Bromus grossus in Latin. It was a common plant in the spelt fields of the past and is now less common than rye broom. It is very rare nowadays. We haven't found any whiskered broom in the Nordics. The weight of the 1,000 grains of whiskered broom is 22.3 gram. Rye broom has been around 15 gram per 1,000 grains. In general, rye broom is lighter than the whiskered brown. The German whiskered brown has been 16 gram per 1,000 grains, and some German, Danish and Russian whiskered brooms are only 6 to 7 grams, so very small seeds. The average 1,000 grain weight for rye broom is 10 gram, and this should of course be increased if you want to have it as an cultivated plant. There can be from 800 to 600 seeds from one single plant, rye broom. It spreads in wet winters in damp places and is more tolerant to poor winter weather than rye. In Sweden, Lars Lindström have been making a nutrient content analysis to rye broom flower. And here you can see the contents it have. Nothing really special. Perhaps the higher beta glucans, a little bit higher of those. Let's then have a look on some other countries around what they have been telling about this plant. Beer from rye broom in Lithuania and vodka in Estonia. Keptinis is beer from rye broom in Lithuania. The Swedes, a small minority that used to be living in Estonia, there are none left yet still at this time anymore. So they have been writing, sometimes in the autumn it was made maltosa from coarse rye broom and rye or autumn wheat grains. Some said it was good and others said it was bad. Most likely it depends on how much you put in other grains in the maltosa. In Estonia, it was named also bear oat in a similar way as it was in Finland. And there are mentions in literature that it was made vodka of it in old days. From the flower you can get nice green color, one Estonian source knows, and blue color are there mentioned in Russian sources. A bread with rye broom dries quickly out. You can make a porridge or a jelly-like porridge in the same way as from oat flour. High beta-glucan makes it binding water well. Sheglov wrote that rye broom bread could be dangerous and gives a feeling of being drunk or you might faint. This is most likely, first of it's a very old source from 1828. The other thing is that before there used to be growing also poisoned weeds in cultivated fields, and most likely this note it doesn't now concern rye broom but another plant that usually used to be there before and that could give those symptoms. From Finland, there is a farmer who have been reporting in an old rye and in his population was also this rye broom, and he said that it must be there because rye broom improved the taste of rye. Here you have Lars Lindström, a young farmer in northern Sweden. He is the only person, as far as I know, who is cultivating rye broom, and he is also making this thin traditional bread out of it. He is mixing the rye broom together with rye and with wheat in making these breads. This is something that we could call a novelty food. And now, as we can see and we have tasted, and it tastes quite good, this rye broom, we can start to ask ourselves, when we have finding of this plant in many archaeological related living places, perhaps it was not a weed. It was thought to be a weed, but perhaps it was actually a cultivated plant. Perhaps it had become weedy again. Or perhaps it was just tolerated. Here you can see the flower to the left of rye broom, and you can see some bread where there is then also rye broom included. Let's then go forward to our main star. Now we have been looking into the weedy part, and the main star, it is the root rye. Root rye was discovered by Per Martin Tvengsberg, born in 1936 and dead 2019. He was working as a building intendant at Häme Museum in the town of Hamar in Norway, when in 1973 he found 10 grains of rye while taking down an old barn in the municipality of Grue. While cultivating them in the museum garden in Hamar, 7 sprouted. The granary had last been used in 1880s, so this could really be something old. One bush yielded 62 straws. They were 2 to 3 meters high, and each spike contained 75 grains. Here you can see Cecilia Jensen standing next to the slash and burn rye in the cathedral ruins of the Hamar Museum. This is then among this first year it was grown. The first harvest was huge. Tvengsberg calculated that half a kilo could yield 6,000 kilos, but after that the grain began to yield less and less. Rye is cross-pollinated and needs a little foreign rye for pollination to stay healthy. Was this the only left bush row rye or root rye? Let's have a look on the map. Finns migrated to Norway on several occasions in the Middle Ages, and maybe also much before that. There they burned forest and cultivated rye and turnips. The map shows how slash and burn cultivation spread in the 15th, 16th and 1700s. Per Martin Tvengsberg's family came from Hankasalmi region in Finland. And so they ended out here, really out here in part of Norway, and here on the border between Norway and Sweden, you find the Finnish forests, the descendants of the Finnish people that came here already very early to do slash and burn cultivation. Why did they go then? They got actually tax releases from the Swedish king if they were moving. And during the 17th century, Finland was a part of Sweden. So this was kind of one country. There are many different rye. Root rye, That's named after the way it grows. So it's a morphological characteristic of the plant. When burning old spruce forests, a highly sprouting species of rye was cultivated, root rye. And one seed it grows tens of straws. Then rye could be named according to the place it was grown. So it could be grown in a slash and burn rye, a slash and burn place, and then it was called slash and burn rye. It had then very small seeds, and that was typically, of course, the root rye. And then when it was called field rye, then it had bigger seeds and was cultivated in fields. It could also be named according to the sowing time. So the spring rye was annual rye. You sow it in the spring, and in the autumn it was yielding. Slash and burn rye, also named midsummer rye, is a biannual crop. You sow it one year and it will give the yield the second year. Winter rye is also a biannual crop that was usually sown in August. And then there is something called frost row. It's also rye. It's also a biannual crop. It could be sown on frozen soil, and some say even at snow. These different sowing times, they are completing each other. For example, if you were sowing slash and burn rye, and maybe some parts didn't grow that well, then you could actually put in there some winter rye still before the winter and get it to grow. And again, if you were only sowing winter rye, so let's say you were sowing it in August, and then some did not grow so well, then you could put later on the same year frost rye in there, and it would then germinate the next spring. And of course, in the spring, if there was a damage and you could see that in these and these parts of the field, the rye did not survive the winter, you could always fill that up with spring rye. So in these old heritage grain populations, we might find all of these different types of rye. The slash and burn rye found by Tvengsberg was registered as a conservation sort in Norway in 2012 under the name Tvengsberg. Then it was also registered in Finland in 2018, and in Finland it was named Mustiala Tvengsberg. As we got the seeds directly from Per Martin Tvengsberg, and we have not in this Mustialan registered variety done any sorting of it. So it is just being cultivated as slash and burn rye, but not in a slash and burn on a field, but we sow it in the beginning of the summer and then harvest it the next year. And we are not sorting out due to any criteria, and that's why we have a very high diversity in this Finnish strain. You can see that there are some of the seeds are really dark and some are light and some are gray and some are brownish. So we have a huge diversity in the color. To get an understanding of this slash and burn cultivation, which was carried out through over the world globally in many countries, if you go far enough back. So for example, in Papua New Guinea and in African countries, they have been doing this also. In Finland, we stopped in 1930s, but it has actually at small scale been carried on, and still there are a few places where it is carried on in order to preserve the cultural heritage annually on small areas. It functions this way. The first year you cut down the trees, usually in January or March, and you leave them to dry the first summer, and they dry the second summer, and sometimes they did also dry the third summer. It depends on how big the wood material there was. And of course, you always took also part of it, the wood that you needed for your own purposes when you were cutting down a slash and burn area. On the third year, in this example, this slash and burn was carried out, so it was burned down, and it was sown immediately after, when the ash still is warm, but it cannot be hot because then it is burning the seeds. And usually it was also sown mixed cropping, so several different seeds at a time, or at least two. The first year when you were sowing, the rye is only doing these green leaves or bushes, but you were also sowing typically either barley or oat together with this rye, and you did also sow turnips. So the first year in August or to September, it was either grazed or cut down as fodder for animals, and then in October you could harvest the turnip. And of course, if you have it as mixed cropping, sown it together with either barley or oats, then in the autumn, in August, September, you also got this yield from this barley. Turnip was usually taken up in October, yes. Okay, the next year, then the fourth year, in August to September, your rye was giving a yield. And then the fifth and sixth year, you often were sowing in this area oat or flax or buckwheat. And after that, you were leaving it to be overgrown with forest again. You could not come back very quickly to the same area that you have burned, at least 10 years, but many times, many more years passed before you came back to the same area. Growing the root rye. Tvängsberg is best sown as the last plant you sow in May or early June. Traditionally, it is said to be sown in a slash and burn area before the last rain before midsummer, or more precisely 48 hours before the last rain before midsummer. It is moved and harvested for fodder in August or grazed in autumn by sheep, and nowadays it's suitable in mixed cropping as a cover plant or as a catch plant or as a forage crop. When sown in spring, it gives a much better yield in the autumn the following year than it gives if you sow it the first year in the autumn. Root rye needs cross-pollination with another root rye to stay healthy. So, and this is the problem that we haven't, this root rye have been DNA tested. It is nearly 100% different from all the other rye that we are cultivating. And now we are looking for finding another root rye so we could cross-pollinate those in order for the population to stay healthy. If it's not healthy, it just becomes shorter and shorter, and then one year it may be not giving any yield at all, or it's dying out in the winter. And we have some hopes now. We have a farmer in the multiplying project who says that one of the rye that he is cultivating, it has more than one seed gives more than 20 or 30 straws. So it's clearly a bush rye. So perhaps there is hope, and we can save this very ancient type of root rye for the future generations. A few pictures here. Mustiala Tvängsberg, root rye at Mustiala Educational Research Organic Farm in Finland, 2017. Close up, you can see the bush forming here with a lot of straw. This is the second year. And you can see here the first year, autumn, how big the bush is. And to the left, it's Per Martin Tvängsberg's taken photo, and to right, a photo taken in Mustiala. And there is also in this presentation a video that you can look on how the root rye looks like on the field. We have made some mineral analysis, and for example, we had 1 year where Twingsberg was giving extremely much iron. This is most likely depending on the soil now, but we haven't been able to redo these trials to get more results from different years. Is that we made also analysis on the leaves and also on the grains, so the leaves the first year. And what we found out that in the leaves there was 4 times more iron than it was in the second year in the grain. So the very iron-rich leaf in the first year autumn could perhaps be used for something. It is really a good fodder for animal before the winter, that they can get this iron, with a lot of iron, these leaves to eat. So grazing on bush rye the first autumn when it's grown is really a good thing for animals. As soon as we got to know that there is a lot of iron in these leaves, then we were actually doing some smoothies with natural yogurt, a little bit lemon, and these rye leaves. We mixed it just in a mixer. Yes, it was good. We had to strain it though, because the mixer did not mix the grass totally fine. Different countries, they are selling this root rye flour, and they call it then slash and burn flour. And even if it's not cultivated anymore in a slash and burn, so it's cultivated just in on a normal field. These are some packages with this from Norway, Denmark, and nobody in Finland are selling this, even if this is really our cultural heritage. Some flakes. We have made some porridge trials also with this.